On this vote, the yeas are 215 and the nays are 208. The concurrent resolution is adopted.
Breaking news late today, that is the House voting to rein in the Iran war. It is a huge rejection of Donald Trump's effort to keep this off the floor, and it took a break for Republicans breaking with Trump and joining Democrats to push this resolution just over the edge. This is one of those nail biters. Now, there's a long road from here to ending the war, but it shows you just how the opposition around the country is rising, and the war would be stopped if the entire Senate and Congress move forward on this with enough votes to trigger the full War Powers Act. So we're not there yet, but tonight we are watching a major rejection of Trump that included full Republicans and, as you see, many of the Democrats in the House. I'm joined by Reverend Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation, of course, president of the National Action Network. Reverend Sharpton, this is a big rebuke of Trump's Iran war at a time when the country has clearly turned against it. What does a vote like this mean tonight?
Vote means that you now have a break in the dam, in the Trump dam, that it doesn't mean that you're going to get a flood, but it means you at least have a leak. And I think that this leak should be troubling to Trump, because as we now go from primary season almost over to the general elections, a lot of Republicans, after seeing these four in the House, are going to have to rethink how do they stand with this Iran situation, with gas prices still up and food and groceries still up. And we don't even see an end to the Strait of Hormuz being open. So this gives a lot of people things to think about. I don't think it's a slam dunk, but it starts the whole ballgame.
Yeah, and you rarely see this kind of War Powers Act resistance in Congress happen this fast.
Right.
Trump had famously promised a quick end to the war, a very hard to predict war. He was wrong. We know why he was saying that, because he knew already he was doing something risky and unpopular. So we've passed his timeline, busted through it. The public is very clear on this. I'll show the poll and remind everyone this is much worse than the first week of the war. Now, 60% of Americans oppose the Iran war. A tiny slice, 28% supporting. You do the math on that, Rev. Translation, a heck of a lot of Republican voters, people who voted for Trump at least once, are against this thing, which means that this is a midterm issue that the party has to worry about.
The party must worry about it. It is a midterm issue. When you see his endorsed candidate lose in Iowa, the handwriting is on the wall that they at least need to stop and look at what they're doing if they're not outright concerned. And clearly, with the president going back and forward with the $1.8 billion slush fund and this, that, and other, none of this is helping them. But the war at a centerpiece of this, because this is hitting people where they live. You can talk all of the ideology you want. You can talk all the politics you want. When a person pulls up to the gas station and it's $4.50 to $6 a gallon, that is not politics to him. That's real life. And that the president can't explain and has not explained.
Mm-hmm. And the wider narrative has really shifted. You know, forever we heard Republicans will stand with him on everything. They won't break. This doesn't move them. That doesn't move them. What'll move? That was we heard that endlessly. And there was a period of time when it felt like that. And now, you know, you really stitched together. You had pushback on tariffs. You had them overriding him with a veto-proof majority on Epstein. You have a lot of concern about the way he's picking candidates in the midterm. So the Senate Republicans were mad at what he did down in Texas. You had recently a vote that not everyone in the country was following, but a vote where he wanted to move forward on some of the immigration stuff. And over the fund you just mentioned, the Republicans said no, and they didn't give him that vote. You have the ballroom pushback. And now today you have this. And you start to say, gosh, it's not that they never buck him. It's that on several big key things in the last months, they keep bucking him.
Consistently bucking him, and it looks like small steps, but it starts adding up. One of the things I think that happens is it's very hard to say that I'm not going to be against somebody who seems to have no problem being against me. So when they see what he did in Texas with Cornyn and others, they say, well, wait a minute. There's no price for even trying to show belated loyalty to this guy. Cornyn voted with him most of the time, and he just tried to destroy him and did. So I think that at some point, your self-esteem kicks in, saying, how am I going to be with a guy that will be disloyal to me if he decides in the middle of the night to just tweet something. So I better protect my own hide, because he certainly is not.
We have breaking news at this hour. MS Now is now reporting that Donald Trump plans to nominate his acting attorney general and former criminal defense lawyer Todd Blanche as attorney general for Senate confirmation. MS Now is reporting President Donald Trump is expected to nominate acting attorney general Todd Blanche to serve in the role permanently in the coming days. A senior administration official confirmed to MS Now. Leading off our discussion tonight is House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Mr. Leader, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I want to begin with your reaction to this breaking news of Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, now being likely offered for Senate confirmation to the permanent role of Attorney General.
Good evening, Lawrence. Great to be with you. Todd Blanche is not qualified to be the Deputy Attorney General, the Acting Attorney General, and he certainly is not qualified to be the United States Attorney General. The role of that particular position is to serve as the people's lawyer. Todd Blanche has been acting like Donald Trump's lawyer, which was his former position, but he has failed to transition in terms of behaving in the best interest of the American people. And we know this based on example after example, most recently, his decision to help initiate the corrupt $1.8 billion slush fund, which they've only backed away from temporarily because of intense public pressure.
I want to get your reaction to what you see in the congressional map as of last night. I know this is difficult because California is still counting votes, but there was a redistricting in California specifically designed by the Democrats to deliver more Democrats from California to the House of Representatives. How is that looking as of today, if you can tell anything about it? And what about the rest of the map nationally?
When it's all said and done, we believe we'll pick up an additional 5 seats in California. And in Texas, by way of example, the Republicans who claim that they're going to pick up 5 seats will be fortunate if they gain 2 or 3. So we'll net more out of California than they'll net out of Texas. And then when we go state after state after state, despite the Republican efforts to try to gerrymander the national congressional map as part of their toxic scheme to rig the midterm elections, they're going to be unsuccessful. They will not get 4 seats out of Florida. They will fall far short of that. And of course, Democrats stand poised to pick up seats all across the country because Donald Trump and the Republican majority in Congress has been a failure. Costs haven't gone down. Costs have gone up. Life has gotten more expensive. Republicans have gotten us into this reckless and costly war of choice over in the Middle East when Donald Trump promised to stop wars, not start them. And I think the American people increasingly recognize that if they want a Congress that actually is designed to make life better for the American people, you got to put Democrats in charge. We will actually focus on driving down the high cost of living and fixing our broken health care system.
You know, I said on this program when I saw Speaker Johnson put the House in a recess because he didn't think he had enough votes to defend against the War Powers resolution that you were forcing a vote on in the House. I said at the time, if you put them into recess, when they come back, you're going to have fewer votes. That's what happens when House members go home to districts facing something very unpopular like Donald Trump's war. It didn't seem to me there was any chance of Republicans coming back with more votes to support Donald Trump's war. And that's what we saw today.
That's absolutely right. This is an example of justice delayed, not being justice denied. We're thankful for the leadership of the once and future chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Greg Meeks, and all of the members of the House Democratic Caucus who pushed this forward. The American people have turned against this war from the very beginning. It's deeply unpopular. The war has actually made life more expensive for the American people. Gas prices are through the roof. This is already on top of a failing Trump Republican economy and the Trump tariffs, which have caused prices to increase by thousands of dollars per year for everyday Americans. And as of the moment, Iran is in a stronger position than they were prior to the war being started, particularly because they have control of the Strait of Hormuz. And so what we need at this moment is for Senate Republicans to do the right thing. Now that the House has acted decisively, reclaim our authority as the only branch of government with the power to declare war. That hasn't happened. We need to end this and end this now. And Republicans in the Senate can do the right thing by the American people over the next few days. And we're hopeful that they'll do just that.
House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. As the midterms come into view, particularly after last night's contests in a number of states, basically every major problem in this country that Donald Trump caused remains unresolved. I mean, just today, they're fighting to make it so they don't have to give back the tariff money, right? Remember the tariffs? Thought we were over that? No. Meanwhile, the war in Iran is ongoing, and despite claims of a so-called ceasefire, there are strikes basically every day. There's lots of firing happening between the two parties. The Strait of Hormuz, of course, remains under Iranian control. As a result, gas prices remain high, about 50% over where they were when we started this. And a real risk in the next few weeks, they could spike up even higher. We're going to talk about that later in the program. And of course, amidst all this, what's so striking, what's so consistent is that the president just couldn't care less. I mean, truly could not possibly be less interested in doing anything about the larger issue of affordability or improving people's lives. And all of that continues to erode his popular support to new levels. Look at this chart from YouGov. I know there's a lot going on there, but stay with me. It's a pretty clear story. The pink line, that's the one that goes longer, right? That's tracking Trump's approval during his first term. The dark red line, shooting basically straight down like a roller coaster, is Trump's approval in his second term. Now, you can see he actually started more popular in this term than in the first one. And you can also see that he is much less popular now than he was at this point before the 2018 midterms. I mean, that's actually quite a gap. About 15 points less popular. And the trend is moving in the wrong direction for the president. Again, because all these crises remain unresolved, because he has either caused or exacerbated all of them, because he doesn't care about resolving them, it's continuing to shoot straight down. And that's why Republicans are so spooked about the upcoming midterms. It's why billionaires are going to spend hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to try to boost Republican fortunes, right? And you can see the Republicans' fear in how they're acting now in Congress. And there's this weird thing going on, particularly on display today. We have talked about the strange paradox that we're seeing, where Donald Trump's revenge tour against Republicans he thinks aren't loyal enough, his desire to retain the strongest possible grip over the party is actually making him politically weaker more broadly. Let me explain, right? Trump has a strong grip on Republican primary voters. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Although we should note his preferred candidate did lose the gubernatorial primary in Iowa last night, somewhat surprisingly. So maybe that's slipping a bit. But more broadly, right, he's basically been running the table. For instance, he was able to unseat Senators John Cornyn of Texas and Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. That's two incumbent Republican senators, longstanding, as well as Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky. Basically forced out Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina, forced him into early retirement, because he certainly would have lost a primary challenge to a Trump-backed opponent. But here's the thing. All those guys are still in Congress. And not just for, a few days. They're still in Congress until next January 2027. They don't disappear or get raptured when they lose their primaries or they announce their retirement. They stick around. They still have jobs. They still have votes. And somewhat understandably, they seem pretty pissed at Donald Trump. And despite being deeply conservative politicians, in fact, zealously fervent, even rabidly so in the case of Thomas Massie, I don't think any one of them is particularly eager to help Donald Trump in his congressional projects. Especially when it comes to the most egregious parts of Trump's current agenda. For instance, right, the slush fund for insurrectionists that the acting attorney general now claims, after some pressure, is dead, although who knows. Both Senators Cassidy and Tillis have been pretty outspoken against it, with the latter using a particularly novel turn of phrase to describe it.
Do you believe this is legal, what the president is trying to do, what the Department of Justice is trying to do?
I'm not going to be an attorney and judge its legality, but I think it's stupid on stilts.
Stupid on stilts, says Thom Tillis. And now, after losing his own primary last week, John Cornyn has, get what? Conveniently found his own conscience. Oh, there it is. I found it after I lost my primary. Quoting from an op-ed from the Wall Street Journal editorial board encouraging Congress to affirmatively vote down such a proposal, to block money for any such fund. The way to ensure the fund is more than mostly dead would be for Congress to put a stake through it. A, that's true. B, huzzah. C, John Cornyn posting that. Now, of course, Trump being Trump, as soon as he apparently directed his henchman, Todd Blanche, right, to kill it and back away from the slush fund, he brought forth another equally ridiculous proposal. So outrageous and corrupt and audacious that it's in the same category as a slush fund, because he wants Bill Pulte, his mortgage fraud attack dog, in charge of national intelligence, the head of all 18 intelligence agencies. Now, the guy is completely unqualified. There's every reason to believe that the only qualification he has in Trump's eyes is his willingness to abuse his office and to use it to persecute and spy on Trump's domestic political critics. That really is the track record that Bill Pulte has, right? So now Trump's spurned senators aren't afraid to call it out anymore.
Nothing that I hear suggests that he's competent for the job for which he's been appointed. And I say that because that's just kind of the kind of conversation among my colleagues, like, OMG. And so I just don't know the guy. But as one person said, he has no military background, no intelligence background. He's going to already keep his other job. And he's not even sure he has a security clearance.
I don't believe he's ever had a security clearance. He clearly has no experience in intelligence. He has no geopolitical experience, no international connections, the sorts of things you would look for. He's a far cry from Dan Coats, but he's got a structural problem. He simply doesn't have 51 votes on the Senate floor, and he may not even have the votes in Intel Committee, and we just need to tell the president that clearly. Now, we'll also tell you, whoever told the president to go ahead and commit to this publicly before vetting it should lose their jobs, because they should know that the math just works against Pulte being confirmed.
Do you see what Tillis always does? That's like the president is being ill-served by his advisors. Like it's the advisors' problem. It's whoever told the president. It's not the president's fault. But Tillis didn't stop there. In a committee hearing with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he also made perfectly clear where he stands.
Did you actually tell Pulte you were going to punch him in the face?
No, sir. I actually said I was going to kick his ass.
Good. Okay, good. I share the emotion.
Well, he's not alone. Seems likely there could be further no votes from senators like Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine, who, of course, is up for re-election. And, you know, when re-election comes around, she loves to show how independent she is from her Republican colleagues. And then you've got Republican Senate Leader John Thune, who conceded that Pulte would face an uphill battle for confirmation. No kidding. On the one hand, it should not take the end of their political careers to inspire people like Bill Cassidy or John Cornyn to speak out, right? I mean, you should just call them like you see them, particularly when the president does something egregious. They should be doing it from the beginning. In fact, they probably shouldn't have voted for Pete Hegseth, to name one example. On the other hand, it is somewhat satisfying to see Trump stymied by a problem of his own making, which this surely is. Today, the Senate bucked him again by removing the funding for his precious, precious ballroom from the spending bill. We know he's pretty angry about that. It's all he cares about. Well, that's not true. Also the reflecting pool. He might even veto the Republicans' own party line bill they're trying to ram through reconciliation to shove more money at ICE and CBP as a result of it not having his precious ballroom funding. It's entirely possible basically all of his agenda, such as it is, could be dead on arrival for the rest of this Congress. And then assuming Democrats can flip the House in November, his legislative agenda could be dead on arrival for the remainder of his presidency. Now, I will say he doesn't seem to care much because he doesn't like the legislative branch. He doesn't think it should exist. He wants to be a king. But he squandered a year of a political trifecta because his need for petty revenge outweighed everything else. And the tighter he grips the party, the more it slips through his fingers, and the more powerful the backlash. The more people he purges, the more he creates the conditions for people to break free.
Now, of course, Trump's war with Iran, his ballroom, and his slush fund aren't the only things that have pushed some congressional Republicans into a form of open revolt. Because yesterday Trump announced that he plans to appoint this guy. I was just talking with Chris about him, Bill Pulte, to serve as the acting director of national intelligence once Tulsi Gabbard leaves the position at the end of the month. I almost did not think this was real when I saw it. Now, Pulte currently serves as Trump's director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. The plan is he will somehow do both jobs, which in and of itself is pretty unbelievable, and even more unbelievable once you factor in the fact that Bill Pulte has zero known national security experience. And I don't think he has any secret national security experience either. I mean, that would be very important in any other administration. But apparently, it's secondary to the quality that Trump holds above all else, which is, of course, loyalty. Now, you've heard his name. We've talked about his name a lot. But he has grabbed headlines over the past year for using his power overseeing mortgage finance records to make criminal referrals claiming mortgage fraud against some of Trump's publicly stated political enemies, such as New York Attorney General Letitia James, California Democratic Senator Adam Schiff, who I'm about to talk to, and Democratic nominee to the Federal Reserve, Lisa Cook. Now, Pulte, who is heir to a family construction fortune, was able to insert himself into Trump's orbit through his membership at Trump's club, Mar-a-Lago, of course, right? He and his wife also donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to pro-Trump groups in recent campaign cycles. And if you were wondering what else Bill Pulte was doing before he joined the Trump administration, well, let me show you. Now, the next clip is a video of Bill Pulte accepting an award just 2.5 years ago, very recently. And before I play it, I just want to warn you that the first two men you will see are not Bill Pulte, and also that the blurred object in this video is, in fact, a dildo.
Here's the first ever, man, live f***ing dildo slap on the PP Live. Pulte, look at this f***ing thing. Come on. So, Bill, this says Bill Pulte. All right?
Yeah.
And then if you notice it's got a tramp stamp with a butterfly on the back.
Only the young.
One cheek yes, it does say only the young on the back here. Only the young, December 14th.
That looks pretty bad.
In case that was hard to follow, confusing, in case you're wondering if it was AI, it was certainly not. They made an award that says Bill Pulte bleeps, but only the young. That's a real video. And just to reiterate, that was not some old footage of Bill Pulte and his college fraternity. That would be bad enough. That was 2.5 years ago. Bill Pulte was old enough to be president of the United States in that video. That's the guy who Trump wants leading U.S. intelligence. Now, and if you are shocked and horrified by that, and you certainly should be, you are not alone. Because Trump's Pulte announcement landed with a wet thud among many elected Republicans. Republican Senate Majority Leader responded. He responded by saying that, quote, "We don't need a weaponized DNI." Fact, true fact. Republican Senator Thom Tillis called Pulte an incendiary attack dog. We love free Thom Tillis and YOLO Thom Tillis world. And even Trump ally and chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Tom Cotton, couldn't bring himself to even comment on the announcement. That tells you a lot, too. Now, we're going to see what Republicans might actually do to push back against Trump's decision to put Pulte in charge of national intelligence. But Democrats are looking to turn this into a fight if Trump doesn't withdraw his woefully unqualified candidate. And that is interesting to watch, too. And joining me now to talk about all of this and more is Democratic Senator Adam Schiff. That's good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
There is always so much to talk to you about, given your background. But I just got to start with Bill Pulte. I mean, I just tried to outline. There's so much to say about the man, but I tried to give a summary there for people who were tuning into this news or trying to learn a little bit about him. You have kind of a special insight into him, given the Trump Justice Department investigating you for alleged mortgage fraud, and given your also extensive intelligence oversight experience. I just want to know what went through your head when you saw this, and how dangerous do you think it is?
Well, what went through my head is this is such an in-your-face move by the president because, of course, the president knows this guy has no qualifications to lead the intelligence agencies, but one, and that is that he is willing to weaponize any access to government data to be used against the president's enemies. That's his only qualification. But can you imagine, notwithstanding the fact, as you just demonstrated, he is apparently an award winner of some sort.
If you call it that.
Can you imagine this guy briefing the president of the United States on the Iran war, on terrorist threats facing the United States, Do we want this basic trust fund baby of a real estate magnate? Do we want him to be leading our intelligence agencies? Someone who has a demonstrated record of abusing even housing data and making false representations about it to suit the president's interests? That is not what we need. And again, it's just another illustration of when it comes to the country's national security interests compared to Trump's petty personal interests, the petty personal interests are going to win out every time.
We also know he clearly wants somebody in this job who will do his bidding as it relates to we saw what happened with Tulsi Gabbard in Fulton County. He can serve in this job as acting. He doesn't need Senate confirmation, which I think people watching know. We've seen Republican pushback. I mentioned some of it, of what people have said out loud. We've seen it around Matt Gaetz, who was actually nominated. What does that look like and feel like, and what could the impact of that actually be?
I think what it looks like is two illustrations we could see with Gabbard. We're going to see just magnified with Pulte. One of them, this happened quite some time ago, when the intelligence community put together a report, an analysis that said the Venezuelan government was not controlling Tren de Aragua, which was part of the basis for these deportations to this prison, maximum security prison in El Salvador. They did it on the basis that the Venezuelan government was controlling this gang. But the intelligence community said, no, they're not controlling the gang. And that contradicted the president's preferred narrative. So Gabbard's chief of staff, I'm sure with Gabbard's support and approval, said, you need to rewrite this report. Basically, you need to tell us what we want to hear, not the true intelligence. That is the worst kind of politicization of intelligence. And the danger is, if you can't rely on the intelligence because it's politicized, you get into an Iraq war or you get into an Iran war. So that's one result. The other result, though, is we saw Gabbard politicizing elections in Georgia. The DNI has no role in domestic elections. It has a role in trying to prevent foreign interference, but nothing that we saw in Georgia indicates that was her purpose. We've also seen her pushing out false conspiracy theories about people within the intelligence community and getting people fired or taking aim at the president's political opponents. That is exactly what Pulte did at the housing agencies, so we can expect a lot more of that.
It's why there's efforts, right, to stop this. And Democrats, though they're not in charge, are using this threat of tanking an upcoming vote on FISA reauthorization if Trump doesn't withdraw Pulte's appointment. What do you think of that? What's the impact of that? And what impact do you think it could have on Pulte staying in this role?
Well, FISA 702 is a very important tool in terms of our national security, but it has also been abused and it needs important reforms. And we've had this very difficult debate about what kind of reforms do we need to make to this program. Now you add to this somebody with a record of politicizing any data he can get his hands on, and we're supposed to entrust this program to him. So it makes it that much more difficult to reauthorize this program. And that, I think, even without it being a deliberate thing, it just makes it harder for people to get to yes on necessary reforms when you have no trust whatsoever, not just in the president, but in his enabler now put at the top of the intelligence community.
I mentioned this. I mean, there's pushback from a lot of areas from Republicans. I'm not naive about it. You certainly are not. We've talked about this before. We've seen some pushback to the slush fund. We've seen pushback certainly more extensively to that than to IRS audits. I mean, some Republicans like Susan Collins and Tom Tillis have spoken out about the audit agreement, but it's nowhere near as much pushback as there is to the slush fund. What do you make of that? Do you think there are going to be the same type of efforts to try to kill that aspect? Because no audits for the Trump family is just kind of outrageous. Or do you think that's a line Republicans aren't going to cross?
It is outrageous, and Republicans shouldn't allow it. I haven't heard them say really much at all about this tax scheme of the president's. Basically, and this may land Blanche the job as Attorney General, but Blanche signed this one-page nebulous agreement that we'll never look back at audits, we won't complete these audits. That has been estimated to potentially save Trump and his family $100 million, perhaps. I mean, how many of your viewers would like basically a IRS get-out-of-jail-free card?
I expect 100%.
Yes, I would think they would certainly go for bargaining. And this is just as corrupt as the slush fund in the sense that the president is negotiating with himself. And not Pulte, but Blanche here, the Attorney General, acting Attorney General, Blanche was his criminal defense lawyer and has never been able to shed that role. He is still Trump's criminal defense lawyer. He is still looking out for his personal client. That is, how do I make sure that Donald Trump doesn't face any criminal or civil liability for his tax returns? That is priority number one. Priority number two or three or somewhere down the line, the American people. That is just not where Blanche is coming from. He just wants the job too badly.
He is so thirsty for the job, which is very apparent. Is there any way, I mean, he could also stay in the job as acting for certainly an extensive period of time. If he's nominated, or even if he's not, is there anything, even if there's Republican support for it, is there any way to stop him?
There is a way to stop him. There's also a way to stop this IRS scheme. I'm preparing an amendment for the reconciliation votes. We're starting tomorrow. An amendment, I think others may as well, to try to kill that, not just the slush fund, but the private tax scheme, the get-out-of-jail-free card. So we could put that into the bill as well. I would think that even if we don't do that, if we can't do that because Republicans won't go that far, that this is so suspect that I'm hoping that the judge that reasserted jurisdiction over the case will look into this tax deal and whether it violates the law, whether it is also just corrupt self-dealing. And even if this judge doesn't, I would hope that a future Justice Department and IRS will do the audits that this government is not permitting, because they should be done. And if he has violated the law, then hold him accountable. If he hasn't, then don't hold him accountable. But he shouldn't get any different treatment than any other American citizen.
No, certainly not.
I want to bring in now Seema Mehta, political writer for the Los Angeles Times, Charlie Sykes, author of the Substack newsletter To the Contrary, and Mark Leibovich, staff writer at The Atlantic and an MS Now political contributor. Seema, curious to know from you, is it surprising that the candidates that were most aligned with the establishment did so well, especially in the governor's race where so many people were calling for change?
Right. I mean, the governor's race was really unpredictable this year. I mean, first, voters really were not paying attention. And then you had, the whole controversy with former Representative Swalwell, after he was accused of sexual assault and misconduct allegations and left the race and left Congress. And then you had, Democratic Party leaders had real fears of two Republicans making the top two, because as you know, we have a primary where the top two vote getters advance without, regardless of party affiliation. So there was a lot of concern among Democratic voters about, who has the best chance. And I mean, if you look at the polling for former Secretary Becerra, I mean, he was mired in the single digits like 2 months ago, and he really shot up. I mean, he's still, our votes are still being counted. It takes a while to count. We have a lot of voters, so it takes a while to count our ballots. But right now, he appears to be in second place, and he and Republican Steve Hilton appear to be on track to move on to the general election, although Tom Steyer is still in the hunt, and he's a couple points behind him. So, but if you look at Becerra, I mean, if you look at Tom Steyer, he supported, a single-payer health care. He was a huge climate change warrior. When you listen to Becerra, he talked about sort of making the state work while still protecting people's rights and getting houses built, like sort of making sure that the trains run on time. And I think that was a message that seems to have resonated with voters.
And speaking of voters, I do want to hear from them in just a second. Becerra has called himself the underdog. Charlie, I want to play a little bit of what California voters said as they cast their ballots.
For me, I think for our state, we need a big change. We need somebody that's going to really help us get to a better place.
Politicians that have been career politicians and just in there for years and years and years, we need change. Anybody can see that.
Voters talking there to our Jillian Frankel. So how do you reconcile that with the results that we saw?
Well, keep in mind that all these candidates got a minority of the vote. What I think is very clear is that this is a change election, but it's also an election where people understand what the stakes are. And you were characterizing this as a victory for the Democratic establishment. I guess I would at least throw out the question, is there really an establishment? Is there really a Democratic establishment anymore? Is there any party establishment? But what I see is that Democratic primary voters are reminding us that they are pragmatists, that they want people who are going to be able to win. And they understand that in order to win these elections, you need to appeal to the mainstream. So, while you have some of the more aggressive progressives who are big stars on social media, Democratic primary voters have been reminding us really for the last decade that they do prioritize winning in these general elections. And you're seeing that in California, but also you're seeing it in places like Iowa, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
We will indeed. They're not necessarily prioritizing the loudest candidates, but the most effective. And Mark, one of the takeaways in California has to be that Tom Steyer is currently at risk of failing to advance in the general election, despite spending $200 million on this race. According to Open Secrets, they predicted that these midterms will be the most expensive in U.S. history, with ad spending as much as 20% higher than in 2022. So big picture here, is the power of the purse waning? What lessons can be learned from the tale of Tom Steyer?
Well, I mean, the power of the purse is obviously a big driving force in politics. You'd rather be a billionaire or have billions of dollars behind you than not in politics. That's pretty unquestioned. I mean, Tom Steyer has proven, it looks like in this race, although we should say that it's not over, and he still conceivably could catch Becerra. Certainly, there's still a lot of votes to be counted. But also when he ran for president in 2020, I mean, he spent billions of dollars, or hundreds of millions of dollars then. Look, people don't seem to like Tom Steyer, put it that way. I mean, people know who he is because he spent a lot of money on ads. So there's, I think, a Tom Steyer specific message here. But I also would echo what Charlie says, which is I think there's a big pragmatic streak in place in the Democratic electorate this year, which I think Xavier Becerra very much benefited from. I remember when I was out there a couple months ago writing about this race, I talked to a lot of people who might have been predisposed to voting for someone like Katie Porter, former Congresswoman, or Matt Mahan, mayor of San Jose, who weren't polling terribly well, but that they liked. They basically said, look, we're going to consolidate. We're going to vote for the Democrat just so we don't get shut out of the November ballot and we don't have two Republicans to choose from. So I do think, like a lot of races, this is kind of all about Donald Trump. Steve Hilton, the Republican, basically got the nomination because Trump endorsed him. And I think a lot of Democrats are basically focused on what they can do to have some kind of counterbalance to Donald Trump and what the Republican Party has done, especially, as it's perceived in California.
Very interesting dynamics we're seeing play out. Seema, you wrote that Californians are, quote, overwhelmed by high housing costs, steep gas prices, and overall unaffordability that threatens the California dream that once drew millions of people to the state. Still, you have incumbents like Karen Bass, who's been attacked for what's going on in L.A. Brad Sherman and Mike Thompson have succeeded in their primaries, essentially. So what could that mean for the general when people are so frustrated and incensed?
Right. I mean, does it impact turnout? That's one question. But I think one of the things that's interesting is, like, if you look at Spencer Pratt, his whole argument was because, the wildfires, the response to the wildfires, but also homelessness, those kinds of issues, the very issues that sort of stirred up Los Angeles residents are those issues that we just talked about. And that's something you hear when you talk to voters statewide. It depends, once we get once we know for sure who our two candidates are in the top two for governor, the state has such an overwhelming Democratic voter registration advantage. Democrats outnumber Republicans nearly 2-1 in the state, so that creates a more difficult path for Steve Hilton. But also there is a great frustration about many of these issues, that you can't afford to buy a house, that people not being pleased with the quality of their kids' schools, homeless encampments, walking by them every day in the city. So I mean, there is frustration. The question is, how does it impact voters' turnout in the next 6 months?
And we will be watching that. And Charlie, I'm going to grant your wish. We're going to talk about Iowa, where Josh Turek was supported by Chuck Schumer. He came out on top. Here's some of what he said on Morning Joe this morning about the Republican he'll face in the general election. Now, Ashley Hinson.
Ashley has a lot to answer for. She has not looked out for Iowans. She just looked out for the billionaires and the large corporations, the donors, the lobbyists, and has been a rubber stamp for the Trump administration. And Iowans are falling behind, and they're ready for change.
The Cook Political Report has now shifted the Iowa Senate seat from likely Republican to lean Republican. How significant is that, and does this give Democrats a better chance here? How do you see this race playing out from here?
Yeah, I mean, it is a reach. There's no question about it. I mean, Democrats are going to have a hill to climb to win in a state like Iowa, but I think they've put themselves in a good position. They have a strong candidate for governor. They have a strong candidate for the United States Senate. So I think that there is the chance that they can make it competitive. So what they have done is they've expanded the map, and Republicans are going to have to spend more money in a state that I think that they had confidently, imagined was in their column. But once again, I think in the primary, you saw pragmatic voters who thought, okay, what will it take for a Democrat to win a state like Iowa that has been voting Republican? It's going, is it going to take, a fiery progressive, or is it going to take someone who can appeal across the party lines? And so I think you're seeing this again in Iowa, that pragmatism.
Mark, a month ago or so, you wrote an article that was titled "Democrats Could Use a Cold Shower Before the Midterms." And you argue that they are getting a little bit too excited about their prospects. Should they be more bullish now that we saw what just transpired over the last 24 hours?
I mean, look, the Democrats should definitely be bullish because obviously, Donald Trump and Republicans have given them a great deal to work with, beginning with a lot of unpopularity coming from the White House and a lot of self-destructive behavior. Having said all that, I do think that Democrats are wrong if they think that their problems are solved. I think the same things that got them into the deep hole that they were in after 2024 remain unresolved. I mean, this is a divided party. It has no ideological coherence or unity. It doesn't have any message discipline. It's unclear who's going to lead them. So to some degree, yes. I mean, Xavier Becerra looks like will be, or would be if he prevails here, would be probably a heavy favorite in November. But just because, they might dodge a bullet, Democrats might dodge a bullet in California ultimately, does not mean that the fiasco around this race does not foreshadow a much larger one come certainly 2028 when Donald Trump is reseated.
Charlie, do you agree?
No, I completely agree. And, I'm going to be very interested to see what happens in other states that are going to determine control of Congress, including what's happening in Maine right now, whether or not, the Democrats really need to knock off Susan Collins. They have a problem there with Graham Plattner. In Michigan, I think they have should be favored to hold on to that seat, but will the primary voters, elect somebody who is perceived to be outside of the mainstream? Those are two seats that the primaries could well determine what's going to happen in November. And I completely agree with Mark that Democrats should not think that all of their problems have gone away. And even after the midterms, I think they need to think of the midterms as kind of like halftime and run through the tape because, the big event is 2028. Until they resolve those problems, they're not out of the wilderness.
Charlie, just really quickly before we go, I wanted to ask you about the pretty strange situation that's unfolding in New Jersey, where Rebecca Bennett won the race to take on Republican Tom Keene. He hasn't been seen publicly for 3 months. He said that he's dealing with health issues, that he's recovering, but he's been pretty opaque about when he's going to come back to actually take on his role. What's your take on what's going on there?
Well, you have an invisible member of Congress. Now, look, we have a lot of invisible members of Congress who have basically been potted plants. This gentleman is going through something. I mean, I certainly wish him the best, but it's not where you want to be if you are a Republican to have one of your members in a swing seat who has just vanished from the face of the earth. That doesn't strike me as a particularly winning formula.